the seeds of this were planted when Daniel and I were speaking at the Aspen Institute earlier this summer. And Daniel and I were the co-keynotes of this conference, and the conference audience was pediatric hospital CEOs, their board chairs, and a lot of scientists and researchers that work on children's health. And Daniel and I were each told that we had 10 minutes and we shouldn't use any slides. Maybe we could have a few if we really wanted some. And so Daniel had 150. So I know that doesn't surprise any of you. And he had a really fantastic run-through of every possible technology, diagnostics, therapeutics, digital health that could benefit kids, teens, young adults. And I was excited by it. I work with early stage companies. I teach entrepreneurship. I work at Hope Lab where we really care about these issues. But a lot of folks in the audience, I think, not a techie audience, were thinking, oh my God, how do we make these things real? How do we bring these things back to our work? So the question that I wanted to talk about a little bit today was, what do we need to do to translate the power of interactive technologies, exponential technologies, to improved health and well-being of kids and young adults? And I'm going to talk you through a little bit of what we do at Hope Lab, what our history is, some of the tools we're trying to use, and then ask you to think about what tools you have, what you can share with us, how we might partner, but just collectively as exponential medicine, as this community, how we think about this part of it, how we think about taking the power and these amazing advances and go through the challenges of actually getting them in the hands of people and used by people who need them. So just to start off, I want to give a little bit of a history and a little bit of who we are at Hope Lab. So Hope Lab was founded and is funded by Pam and Piero Midyar. Piero Midyar is the founder of eBay. And we're a social innovation lab. We bring together behavioral science, primarily behavioral psychology, human-centered design, and technology to improve health and well-being for kids and young adults. And we work in a few different areas. I'll give you some examples later. But that really what we're trying to do is bring together the science, the design, and the technology to create and scale solutions that can really help have a positive, measurable impact on health and well-being of young people. So a quick little bit about the history of Hope Lab, a really interesting founding and genesis story. Pam Midyar was working in a lab, kids with leukemia, and was really pondering and kind of flummoxed by this question of why kids who were going through treatment for cancer would not take all of their chemo and antibiotic meds. This is crazy. The doctors were telling them they needed to do it. Their parents were telling them they needed to do it. They were being read the Riot Act when they were leaving about what would happen if they didn't do it, and yet many were still not doing it. And so there was this question about, these are kids. Pam was also a gamer, and she thought, well, maybe there's a way that we could use video games to help tackle this challenge, to get kids more engaged in and more empowered around taking their cancer meds and actually having optimal outcomes when they went through cancer treatment. So the game Remission was created, and this was basically meant to do a couple of things. It was meant to educate the young people about the role that the drugs played in fighting the cancer in their bodies, so it took them through the body. And it was also meant to empower kids, to give them a sense of agency and a sense of power over something that was really, really challenging for them to navigate. The notion of it, which is the notion we're trying to carry forward from this gaming world into the work that we do now, is really thinking about reverse engineering health. So we think about a health behavior that we want to encourage, taking your meds. We think about the psychology behind that, and we really explore that psychology. Why would somebody take them, not take them? And then we think about, these are kids, they're digital natives, they're engaged with technology in so much of their lives. We think about how might we use a technology or technology-mediated way of helping to deliver that psychological nudge or psychological content to them. So Remission was actually the first video game to go through an RCT. Did an RCT of 375 teens with cancer, and the results were impressive. They had higher levels of chemo in their blood, indicating that they were taking their drugs, and they took their antibiotics more consistently. So a really terrific outcome. But it also raised really interesting questions. It took us back to this initial question of, what was this about? Was it about the fact that because they played the game, they knew more about cancer? Or was it about this agency and self-efficacy? And what we learned, was published in this paper in Pediatrics, was that actually the self-efficacy and the empowerment were really the powerful active forces, that the knowledge alone, the delivering the knowledge through a video game was not actually sufficient to move the needle. It was this empowerment and this sense of self-efficacy. So that's learning that we've taken from 10 years ago, 12 years ago, video games were new, into the work we're moving forward with now. And we're trying to think about, in today's digital interactive world, in the world of what today's young people do, how can we apply some of these same principles and learnings in some of the challenges, using some of the platforms and technologies that we have available today. One last thing before we leave this, which was another interesting finding. It was fMRI studies that are basically showing that when kids were playing the game, motivation memory centers activated in their brains. When they were simply watching it, it didn't. And so there was also an interesting notion here about the interactive agency and the actual control that happened when they were playing. So something that we think about also carrying into our future work. What we've done now is we thought about where are the areas in the healthcare system broadly where there's a really strong interest in innovating in health and well-being for kids and young adults, and a real need for development of innovative solutions. And we've tried to tackle a few of those. And I'm going to walk quickly through what we're doing. And I want to talk about the tools that we're using in this spirit of translation to try to take these things from a gadget, a gizmo device, a VR headset, to something that actually can be impactful and deliver measurable impact in health and well-being. And the tools that we're using, as I said, are behavioral science, primarily behavioral psychology, systems thinking, and human-centered design. And one of the things we're doing now at Hope Lab, and would love collaborations and input on, is thinking about how do we combine these things? How do we combine real science, real efficacy work in the context and in the course of developing new products and services? So just a little bit here, not meant to be read, really just to give you a sense of some of the work that we're either publishing or sponsoring around some of the things that we talked about in resilience, in pro-social behavior, in things that really capture young people and develop this kind of agency and purpose that we see as so powerful in behavior change. What we've tried to do in a process, from a process perspective, is we're trying to weave together a design phase with a research phase. And so we've got a research team working on doing an empirical needs assessment, doing psychological targeting, working on empirical pilot, in conjunction with a design and business team doing the design and business research, developing prototypes, and getting the implementation and the pilot work out in the field. And this has been a really interesting piece of this implementation question, and of this question of how we constantly iterate and try to develop tools that we can demonstrate efficacy on. I want to move in a little bit to human-centered design. This is a quote. We've got a group of young people who are cancer survivors or in cancer treatment who are our advisors. One big premise and a big piece of what we do is to engage young people as co-designers in the work that we do. So this is just a sense of, from one of these young people, what it feels like. And what we're trying to do here is to really engage those young people in saying, this is the experience that I'm having. How can I create a better experience for myself and for other young people? So we're working with these young people. We're developing right now a prototype for something called Cancer Mind Shift that's really looking at how does a young person with cancer engage with and develop a sense of purpose and of agency, and deal with this kind of being an adolescent and going through this big challenge at the same time. Right now, we've been doing a lot of work with young people around the country through partnerships with Stupid Cancer and with a number of pediatric cancer centers. And we're in the process right now of developing a prototype and testing it with these young people that's a chatbot. So the form factor it's taking currently, based upon a lot of this work with young people, is an interactive tool that helps them connect with others and have an opportunity to vent, to get support, to do the things that they need to do to stay connected and to feel like they've got some control and power. A second area we're working is with at-risk teen moms and their babies. We're working in partnership with Nurse Family Partnership, which many of you may know, both in the US and abroad. And this was an interesting one where the clientele of Nurse Family Partnership is teen moms. They're digital natives. They're using technology in everything they do in their lives. Again, a lot of human-centered design work and a lot of psychology work to understand that in this program, the most important thing, the thing that leads to successful completion of this evidence-based program is the ability to set and track goals. And so we worked with them to develop a tool through lots of work, interviewing nurses, interviewing the moms, developing prototypes and testing them, which is called Goal Mama. But it's basically a digital tool that takes the program and brings the nurse and the mom together. It doesn't compete with the nurse and the mom seeing each other in person, but it's a complement that engages the young person and engages the nurse, and a really exciting effort in getting kind of the old guard and the young people together to come up with something that works for both of them. Finally, the area that we're really just beginning to tackle, and we'd love input and collaboration, is the area of what we're calling mental and emotional well-being of teens and young adults. I don't need to tell you this, a lot of statistics that are really troubling. Health systems we've talked to are very troubled by the fact that they don't have solutions that work for young people. This is a problem, this is an area that really needs innovation. And so in this one, we stepped back and took a systems thinking approach. We've worked with a number of organizations and individuals who have a range of expertise, from young people to providers and payers to advocacy organizations. Went through a systems process and came up with a guiding star and a near star. The near star, I think, really relevant to this group, really looking for institutions, organizations, and youth to build solutions that have measurable positive impact on the mental well-being of teens and young adults at significant scale. So a challenge for us, but I think one that really is an important one at this point. So what we've done in this systems thinking process, I don't know how many of you have done this or have seen a systems map before, but a very rigorous process to really look at the system that's contributing to the current state, to understand it, to come up with some leverage points, and to really think about where both we as Hope Lab and others out there in the community who are interested in this problem can begin to engage and develop solutions. So we're starting at Hope Lab on the area of peer connection. So we're doing some deep design research and psychological research in that area right now, but we're also keeping many of these other areas in our focus. And really, before we go out with solutions, either by partnering with early stage companies or by developing something, trying to understand, again, what are the psychological drivers, what are young people saying their problem is, and what they'll use, and how can we actually bring those things together in a way that can be catalytic and that can help really bridge the gap between, I think, what are some amazing scientific developments and tools and the ability to actually get these things implemented and scaled and used out in the community. So I'll leave you just with this if you haven't seen it. Another project that Hope Lab worked on, Mood Meter, was featured in this special Time edition that came out just this week on the science of emotions. And I think just a really interesting piece that takes us back to the importance of behavioral psychology and behavioral science in the efficacy of a lot of the things that we're all trying to work on, that we can have the greatest technology available, but if we can't really engage people at an emotional level, we're not going to be successful. So with that, thank you.
Thanks so much. Amazing work. One question I have, we pioneered the cancer platform at Stanford when I was a pediatric hematology oncology fellow. But different adolescent kids with cancer might respond to the remission game differently. A lot of the engagement apps seem one size fits all. Where might we go with all this engagement to really tune it to the individual?
I love the fact that you just asked that question, because we actually just had a meeting yesterday. One of the things we're thinking about, and Daniel and I have talked a lot about, is I was thinking about entitling this "What's in a Game?" I mean, it was a game 10 years ago. What is it now? And we were meeting yesterday with an interactive storytelling company that uses a whole range of virtual reality, storytelling, games, and allows young people or older people who are interacting with this technology a much more customized and personalized experience. So I think one of the things we're thinking a lot about is, as technology has evolved and as the technologies that young people are using elsewhere in their life have evolved, how do we actually stay up to date on those technologies and begin to integrate them into the solutions that we create so that we can, to your point, create as personalized an experience as they're expecting. And it's one of the things about the human-centered design process and really having these young people sit with us and build these things and you know, kind of kick them around, is we'll learn who likes this, who likes that, and that there's some significant variation.
Well, keep up the great work, and they can find you at what website?
It's hopelab.org, www.hopelab.org, and I'm mlaws@hopelab.org, and I'd love to hear from you, and please reach out. We're very, very partner-focused on the technology side, on the design side, and with researchers. So we'd love to have this community engaged in our work.
Great. Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks. All right.